Hello guys, and welcome back to another tutorial. So in today's video we're going to learn how to make this beautiful dress. If that sounds like something you're interested in learning, keep on watching and let us get right into the video. So I'm going to start off by marking out my shoulder measurements divided by 2. From there we're going to come down by 1 inch for the shoulder slope, and then I'm going to create the armhole. Next, I'm going to mark my nipple to nipple measurements. For me, that is 3.5. When I divide it into 2, it's 3.5. So I'm marking that out, and I'm going to just rule a straight line and create my dart at that point. After doing so, I'm coming back to create my armhole curve at the armhole area. Next, I'm going to go ahead to mark 3 inches at this point for the neck width, and then for the depth I'm going to come down 1 inch from my bust point, and then I'm going to just mark that out, and then we're going to rule a straight line to meet the 3 inches we had marked out initially at the top. Now after doing so, I'm going to start adding in my body measurements divided by 4. So we're going to start off with our bust measurement, and then we're going to go down to the waist measurement as well. Don't forget you're going to return the 1 inch that you took back to your body measurement. Next, I'm going to mark the difference between my shoulder to my waist for the front and the shoulder to waist for the back. For me, that is about 1.5 inches. So I'm going to mark that at that point, and then we're going to rule this to our bust point line, our nipple to nipple line rather. So that is going to be our side dart. So I'm just ruling this out now. So now I'm going to divide my neckline here, and whatever I have, I'm going to mark the midpoint, and we're going to take out about 1/2 inch from that point just to eliminate any bulging or excess at that point. Now we're going to cut this out from the rest of our pattern. Next, from the under bust line, we're going to come up at the midpoint here by 1 inch, and then we're just going to curve this back to the under bust to create that shape at that area. So you can do 1.25 or you can do 1 inch. So I later went ahead to add to that, and then now we just want to curve this. You can see that the part I was using wasn't as curvy, so you want to make sure when you're doing this you use the curvy part. You can see that mine is looking a bit straight, so just take note of that. Now I'm going to go ahead to cut the side dart here, and then after doing so I'm going to close up the bottom dart here. So after closing this bottom dart, we want to go ahead to cut that part out because we're going to have a basque at that point. So you can see that I'm just going to go ahead to close up that part and then just tip it down. After tipping this down, we're going to go ahead to cut this part out like I mentioned earlier. After doing so, now we want to go ahead to close this part, this dart we took at this point. We're going to close it and then tape it in place, just aligning everything so everything is sitting down nicely. After doing so, I'm just retracing that part out, and then I'm going to move on to cut it out. Now I'm cutting out this dart area, and I'm just going to use that to close up our side dart. Next, I'm retracing out this side here, and we're going to go ahead to cut that part out as well. This is what we have. We're also going to go ahead to extend this part here because we're going to have a basque at the bottom part. But before we do that, I'm going to go ahead to slash this top part in two. So I'm just ruling a straight line from the shoulder area down to our nipple to nipple line. And we're going to create slash and spread for this. So we're going to cut this in two and then bring in an extra piece of pattern paper. So this is what we have now. Now I'm going to bring in the pattern paper and we're going to place it on top. After placing this on top, I'm going to use my tape to decide how wide I want this to be. So I'm going to work with 3 inches, and I think I used 2 inches at the top area because I didn't want that part to be too wide. Now I'm just going to use my tape to tape them down in place. Do not forget the measurement you're using, the measurement you're working with. So if you're working with 2 inches, 3 inches, however wide you want that to be, you just want to go ahead to mark it out and then just tape this down. So after taping this down, we're going to move on to cut this out. So we're done with this, and this is what we have. Now we want to go ahead to add the basque to the lower part of the bodice.
The basque area.
So I'm just taping this down to the fresh pattern paper I have here. I ran out of tape, and that is why you can see that I'm just trying to work with what I have. So we're just going to tape this down at the side here, and we're going to extend the basque. So you want to decide how deep you want your basque to be. I extended mine by 3 inches and I just marked that out, and now all I have to do is to just rule this to meet each other, and then after ruling this out we want to go ahead to cut it out, and that is it. So for the back, I just have my basic bodice pattern for the back, and we came down on the neckline area by 1 inch, and I'm just going to go ahead to cut this out. I didn't add any seam allowance at the side, but we have our zipper allowance at the center back. Now this is the fabric we're working with. This is a floral fabric, and I'm working with 3 yards of this fabric. So now let's go into the cutting. So to cut this out at the main bodice area for the front, I'm just going to add 1/2 inch seam allowance at the bottom as well as at the top, and then at the sides I'm going to have 1 inch seam allowance at the sides. The same thing will apply for the back piece. I'm going to have 1 inch seam allowance at the sides, 1/2 inch seam allowance at the top as well as at the bottom, and then for the zipper part we are not going to add any seam allowance because we already have our zipper allowance at that point. So I'm just going to go ahead to cut everything out. For this part here, I'm adding half-inch seam allowance at the shoulder area, at the bottom part, and then at the side we're going to have 1 inch seam allowance at the side here, and then at the front we're also going to have half-inch seam allowance. So after cutting this out, these are all our fabric pieces. I also went ahead to cut out lining piece for each and every one of the fabric piece we've gone ahead to cut out. So now we want to go ahead to start sewing. I'm going to take out the pattern paper and we're going to start off with the front piece. So we're going to take them out so we can start sewing now. So you can go ahead to iron interfacing on the main fabric piece. If you feel like you won't be able to sew on it, like it stretches a lot, you can go ahead to iron interfacing, but I won't be ironing interfacing on mine simply because I can work with it and it doesn't stretch at all. So now the first thing we're going to do is we're going to add our lining piece on the main fabric piece, right sides facing each other, and then we're going to stitch it down at this point and then at the sides as well. So I'm going to take this to the machine now to sew. For the back piece also, we're going to stitch them together. To do this, I'm going to use my pattern to just place to transfer the dart markings, and then we're going to stitch our darts in place. And then after stitching your darts in place, you want to go ahead to add your lining piece. You're also going to stitch the darts for the lining as well, and then stitch along the sides all the way up, and then for the sides as well. We're going to do that and set it aside. So this is the first part we went ahead to sew. I've gone ahead to stitch it down and give it a good press. Now we want to go ahead to gather the top as well as the bottom. We want to gather it in place. So to do this, we want to go ahead to take note of where we're going to gather. This is going to stay at the nipple to nipple line area. So we're going to go ahead to run loose stitch. You can pleat this or you can choose to gather loose stitch, which is what I did here. I've gone ahead to run loose stitch along the sides, and then all you need to do is you need to just gather this back to your initial measurement. So I'm going to take my tape now and I'm going to place it along the sides, taking note of what I have, excluding the excess, the slash and spread gathers we have there. So what I have was about 8 inches. So I'm placing my tape here to make sure what I have is what I need. It wasn't up to 8 inches, so I had to go ahead to gather it again. So I'm going to gather this until I have what I need from that point. And you want to make sure that you're gathering this at the bust area where your bust is supposed to sit, so that when you're wearing this, you're not going to have that flat effect. So you can see now that I'm taking note of what I have at the shoulder area, excluding the excess we added, so that when we gather this, what we have there is what we need. So this is what it's looking like. It wasn't up to what I needed, so I'm going to go ahead to gather this again so that it's up to the number we have at our initial shoulder measurement. So I hope you understand what I'm explaining. So I'm going ahead to gather this to the desired length we need for the top and the bottom. I'm going to go ahead to do the same thing for the opposite side as well, and then we're going to come back to start stitching this together. So this is what we have after doing both sides. Now we want to go ahead to add the basque area to this.
And now we want to go ahead to attach the bottom part. So what we're going to do is set this aside.
So to add the top part to this basque area, we just want to align everything, and you can see that I created a notch at the midpoint just so I know where it is going to start from. And then we want to go ahead to place both of them down and take note of that midpoint area as well. You can see I also went ahead to sew fabric straps for the design at the midpoint. We're going to have them sitting half-inch away from that midpoint notch we created. So I'm going to pin this in place.
Quarter of an inch, quarter, quieter. I'm a reckless lover,
After pinning the straps in place, we want to go ahead to attach the top and the bottom part together. So all we have to do is just pin them together in place and then stitch it together. So we're going to go ahead now to attach them. So now to start sewing this from that midpoint where I created a notch, we're just going to place this down and we're going to start stitching this from that midpoint area all the way down. And then when we're done, we're going to flip this over and then do the same thing for the opposite side as well.
Now the lining piece was a bit long, so before we continue, I'm going to just trim a bit of the lining so we're not confused. We're just stitching just the lining, trimming just the lining rather. Now we're going to stitch this part too.
After sewing, this is what it looks like. We've gone ahead to attach the both of them. Now we want to add our lining piece to just cover that up. So we're going to place the lining piece down like this. You want to make sure you create a notch on the lining piece as well, so you align everything together equally. And then after placing it down, I'm going to pin this in place just so it doesn't move when we want to start sewing. So I'm going to pin this very well and then we're going to stitch along that line. Now after pinning this in place, we're going to flip this over to this side so we can just stitch this along this line we already have. So you want to use the line we already went ahead to sew as a guide and just stitch it down, and then on this opposite side you stitch it down as well, making sure not to stitch on that piece. So when you stitch it all the way down, you're going to take it straight down to just close up the sides, and be careful not to stitch on the upper part. So after doing so, this is what we have. I'm going to go ahead to trim out the excesses and we're going to flip this over to the right side. Now after flipping this over to the right side, we want to go ahead to add the back piece. So I'm just bringing in the back piece and I'm laying them right sides facing each other. So we're just going to place them right sides facing each other like this, and then we're going to go ahead to join them by the shoulder area. You can see that I'm just flipping the back piece over on the right piece to sandwich it, and then we're just going to stitch this along the sides by half an inch. So I'm going to go ahead now to join the front and the back by the shoulders together. So all you have to do is just place them like this and then just cover it with the lining piece like this. The back is doing all the work, and then all you have to do next is just to stitch it down by half an inch. So you can go ahead to pin this in place and then just take it to the machine to sew. So I'm going to go ahead to join both shoulders together and then join them by the sides following our body measurements. And after I was done doing that, this is what we have. You can see what the inner part is looking like. Now what we want to do is we want to take the measurements we have at the bottom part here. So I'm just using my tape to just place along the sides all the way to the other side. So what I have here is 35 inches. So we're going to use 35 inches to cut out the fabric we're going to use to create the gathers for the bottom part. So you want to make sure the fabric you're working with is 35 inches times 3. So for instance, if what you have is 38 inches, you want to make sure the fabric is 38 inches times 3 wide. So now before we go ahead to gather this, I want to go ahead to just place my tape from this point here. I'm going to take it all the way to my waistline. So my waist is 17 inches and that is where I'm starting from. And then I'm going to take it all the way down to the full length that I'm working with. And you can see that what I need for the full length is what I have here. But if that is not what you have, what you need to do is just cut it out to your desired length. Now I'm going to go ahead to run loose stitches for the bottom part and gather it to that 35 inches. So this is what I have. I've gone ahead to run loose stitches and I went ahead to gather this till I got that 35 inches that I need for the bottom part, and now I'm bringing in the top part so we can join the top piece and the bottom piece together. I also opened up the seams for the inner part and just gave everything a good press. Now to join this together, we're going to have them placed right sides facing each other, and then I'm going to pin them together in place so we can sew this. So I'm just going to pin everything together from this starting point all the way to the opposite side. After pinning them together, we want to go ahead to stitch this down following the shape we have there. After sewing, this is what we have. You want to go ahead to iron everything out so everything is staying in place. Now we want to move on to attach our zipper at the back. So we're going to go ahead now to flip this over to the back so we can attach the zipper. And if you feel like your fabric is see-through, you might want to add lining to the bottom part, but I am not going to be adding lining to mine because mine is not see-through and I'm actually okay with the way it is. All I have to do is overlock those rough edges at the waistline area. So now from this point here, we're going to go ahead to stitch it all the way down, and then we're going to attach our zipper to the top part. If you'd like me to make a tutorial on how to attach your invisible zipper, let me know in the comments and I'll work on making one. Now for our sleeve, I have a basic sleeve pattern here. We're just going to divide this in no particular order. I'm just going to go ahead to divide this into multiple pieces so that we can create the sleeve we need for this dress. After dividing them, I'm going to bring in the fabric piece and I'm going to place this on fold so that we're cutting both sleeves at once. So I'm going to place this down now, and then we're going to go ahead to cut the pattern paper into all the pieces we have marked out and then just separate them. You can go ahead to do this on your pattern paper. When you divide this, you go ahead to just tape it down on a fresh piece of pattern paper before you go ahead to cut it on your fabric. But I did not have paper tape anymore, so I had to do mine this way. So you can just skip this step and do all the work on your pattern paper before you go ahead to just cut it on your fabric. So now I'm just going to separate them. After I've gone ahead to pieces all the pattern paper, I'm going to go ahead to just separate it. You can do 1 inch away from each other, you can do 1.5 inches away from each other, depending on how you want your gathers on the sleeve cap and the bottom part of the sleeve to be. So after doing so, I'm just going to go ahead to cut this out following the shape I have at that point. And that is why I said you can do this on your pattern paper before you go ahead to cut it out here. But I'm basically doing this now and I'm going ahead to cut this out.
Yeah, so that baby girl will eat. So
Now after cutting this out, we're going to go ahead to fold the bottom part of our sleeve. So I'm going to fold this twice, and then we're going to stitch it down. So you can see that I've gone ahead to stitch it down. Now I want to add my elastic band to that part. So you just want to watch closely at what I'm doing, and then you understand what I'm doing here. So I'm just going to stitch this down, and as I'm stitching this down, I'm dragging the elastic so that we get that elastic effect at the bottom part, so there's a gather at that point. I hope you understand. So I'm going to do this for both sleeves, and then we're going to attach this to our dress. For the sleeve cap area, we're also going to create gathers at the sleeve cap area, or you can go ahead to pleat it. Now after attaching the elastic, we want to go ahead to create the gathers for the top part of our sleeve. I'm just holding this together so I get the midpoint, and I'm going to create a notch at the midpoint. This is going to help me pleat this very easy. So I'm going to create the notch, and then we're going to go ahead to attach this to our dress and just create the pleats. Point where we're going to create the gathers on the sleeve. Now to attach this to the dress, you just want to watch closely at what I'm doing. So I'm just going to start sewing this, and then when we're getting to where we have that notch at the sleeve area, we're going to start pleating at that point.
You're going to sew this till you get to that joining at the shoulder area.
Now when you get to where we have the joining at our shoulder area, that is where you want to start pleating this. So I'm going to attach that part where we notched at the sleeve, making sure that it's lining up with the joining at our shoulder area. So you can see that we have excess fabric at that point. So that is where we're just going to start pleating. So I'm going to pleat this, and then you can see that I have about 3 pleats at that point. I'm going to create 3 more pleats at this part here, and then I'm going to just continue pleating this till I have those 3 pleats. And after pleating those 3 pleats, I'm going to continue sewing my sleeve just without the pleats. So you just need to watch closely and you understand. If you have any questions, do not forget to leave it in the comment section below, and I'll do my best to answer those questions. And if you're a new subscriber, hello. In this channel we create sewing content and fashion related content. Do not let this be your last. Subscribe and be a part of my YouTube community. So we've gone ahead to attach the sleeve. Now we want to go ahead to close the sides of the sleeve. We're just going to finish it up, and I'll come back to show you the final results. So guys, this is the final result of the dress. If you enjoyed watching this video and you found it helpful in any way, do not forget to give it a thumbs up. Subscribe if you're not yet subscribed already. See you guys on the next one. Bye guys.